All right. So, welcome, guys. So we came up with a list of topics yesterday based on some things that we're seeing that might be interesting. The first topic we were going to get into actually was launched back in February by this guy named Andrej Karpathy. He's a Tesla OpenAI guy who coined the term vibe coding. And by the way, he has these awesome series of videos on YouTube if you haven't seen them. They're fantastic. And it's just sort of this idea you can sit down and code, wherever the vibe takes you, right? And so we're going to talk about that a little bit. And like, what are the limits of that? How does that maybe fit into the enterprise, that kind of thing. Then we're going to shift into AI in the enterprise. Specifically, where we see large companies struggling, because they are definitely struggling. And maybe offer some ideas about how do we break through that. And then, where are they now? Where are they going? And then the last topic I had was just GPT-5 was launched a little bit, a week and a half ago, 2 weeks ago, and now we've had a little bit of time to digest that, experience that. We'll talk a little bit about that and our impressions and tips for getting the most from that. All right, so shifting into vibe coding, I thought, can I share? Let's see, I'd like to share a screen. Cool. You might have to edit this part out.
I'm impressed.
You like my
This is the real test. Can we do screen sharing?
Can you guys see that? All right, so I was like, I gotta find the famous tweet, right? So this is the famous tweet where Andrej Karpathy sort of coins this term vibe coding, where you give into the vibes and sort of forget that the code exists and so on. So I won't read sort of the whole thing, but to me this has sort of become a big thing. And so I thought it'd be interesting to just sort of talk about, does this a hobby thing? Does this make its way into the enterprise? Is it already there in some way? Maybe what does this even mean for developers and and development teams in the enterprise, and so on. So anyway, so I'll sort of open it up, and I think Stu, you may be the king of vibe coding, I would guess. Maybe
I love it.
So let's start with you. What do you
Mostly because Stu has little else to do on the weekend, but okay.
That's right.
Clearly.
Exactly. Yeah. So, I love it. I was doing it right before this call. I think it's,
what is it? Like, how do you think?
What is it?
How would how would you describe it? Obviously, we saw his version of it, but how would you just sort of describe it?
I think it's can mean different things, and I think when we get to the limits of vibe coding, that's when I think there's probably a distinction a little bit between AI assisted coding and all the way into vibe coding, right? So vibe coding is a subset of AI assisted coding, the way I look at it. So I think what you have is when you're vibe coding, you're really relying on the AI agent to do most or all of the coding of the actual coding for you. And what you're doing is you're kind of like the pair programming, pair programmer working with your agent to do this, or the manager of the agent, if you want to think of it that way. You're you're having a conversation with the agent, and it's doing the coding, and you're just you're going back and forth. You get in the flow, and I love it for someone like me, who has spent most of my career working with technical people and being that manager of technical people, but not having the opportunity that often to actually get in and code. My coding skills had gotten rusty, but I understand the concepts pretty well. So to be able to just talk to in English, go back and forth with one of these agents and produce real meaningful work is awesome. As Jim says, that's what I do all weekend because it's just too fun to do anything else. Right? It's like my hobby.
Like what's your setup? Like when you say this, are you just like, I'm just typing stuff into ChatGPT, or no, I have sort of Claude code connected to, like, what is your setup?
So like now we're going to get into Pepsi versus Coke discussions, and everyone has different preferred setups or whatever.
Well, you're in Atlanta, so Coke is the answer.
So I actually, I'm really deep into this, so I use, a combination of tools. So, but I think probably at the moment, the two tools that at least get the most publicity out there for vibe coding are there's one called Cursor, which is we can talk about in a second, and the other one that's getting a lot of attention right now is Claude Code. So Cursor is if you do much coding, one of the popular kind of editors where you actually go in and do the coding as a programmer is called VS Code. And so a Visual Studio Code is where the VS comes from. And Cursor is basically a fork from that. So it was built off of that base, but it's got special functionality in it that allows, that makes it really good to work
So you
with
download that.
AI
Download that
agents.
to
You
your
download
laptop.
that. And so you're in there, you're looking at the code that it's creating. You can make edits yourselves to files as you needed. You're talking to the agent as you go. The agent has tools it can access to do its work. So, if you just ask ChatGPT, write some code for me, one, you got to pick that up and put the
Copy
code
and
in
paste
somewhere where it can run. And then two, you've got to two, you're a little limited, but this can update, source code control for me. It can go search the internet for me. It can, you send me a Slack message, if you set it up right, it can do all that sort of stuff. And
So
then,
you've got Cursor talking to what?
yeah, so my setup right now, if we want to really dork out, is my setup right now. So Claude Code is the other one.
Yeah.
Claude Code can also work inside of VS Code as well. So and it can work inside a Cursor. Or you can literally just run it from your terminal, right? Like but my setup right now is I use a little combo of both, depending on what I want to do. If I'm using Cursor at the moment, I'm preferring GPT-5 most of the time.
Interesting.
And then I will, and usually what I do is try to follow the same process you would coding. So in other words, so the first thing I do is I don't ask it unless it's something simple. I don't say, "Hey, can you just code this for me?" I say, let's write a spec on how to do this, right? And we agree on the spec for it, and then I tell it to implement the spec, and we go through like that. Yeah.
What app have you built that's kind of like a cool app that you built, vibe coding, that you're excited about?
Oh, now we're working, in with Answer Rocket, we're able to build these we're able to build analytical agents, inside. So, connect to data and do all sorts of cool things. And when you get to the advanced stages, if you want, you can do that. You can write Python to do that and stuff like that. So I've been building a lot with that. I built, I built a little college football stats website. All sorts of crazy, personal things.
Did you come into the day intending on building a college football website, or did that just come to you as you were vibing along?
I didn't do that
that's
today.
The thing I want to do.
I didn't do that today, but yeah, there was a day when I woke up and decided to do that. Yeah.
So Jimmy, you vibe coding anything?
Well, let me say it. Let me sort of take a little bit different take here. And that my question maybe implied the direction there. So, ultimately we're in the middle of this giant hype cycle of AI, and I'm a subscriber to it and a participator in it and a contributor to it, and I believe in enormous parts of it. But sort of when we get out to the edges in things like vibe coding, hey, I can stand up a quick app. Yes. But then there gets to be this question of eventually, hey, are we going to sort of get to the return? Can we create something that is production-like and useful and actually contribute to the enterprise or the clients we serve? Do we understand the code that was just created? Is sort of what's the risk that we introduce around it? So awesome, create a personal app. Create something for yourself or something for a group, something that's low risk. But somewhere in there becomes sort of some risk that this gets taken a little too far. And I'm curious sort of where you guys are, what you all think about that.
Yeah, I was watching some podcast on A16Z, and one of the partners on there was talking about how they built this app to allow people to take a selfie with Jensen Huang, the NVIDIA CEO. And she goes, yeah. She goes, but fortunately, I had somebody DM me that I actually had embedded my OpenAI key in the code. It was like basically visible.
Right.
She's like, yeah, that's probably not cool. To your point, Jim, of so this gets really interesting to go, vibe coding. So my little, and it's been for me a little bit of a hobby as well to sort of mess around. And I'm trying to build some iPhone apps, and which is built in Swift code, and you have to, so I'm using Claude Code to do that. And the thing is, I've got an app that works. And if you sat me down and said, hey, write a Hello World app in Swift, I would literally have no clue how to do it.
Right.
But I have an app that's written in that works. It is, I am finding, Stu, like you said, you have to sort of apply actual design principles. You got to design, and you have to do a security review and a code review. And I did this one thing where I said, hey, review the code. And it was basically like, yeah, this is a total piece of garbage, monolithic, code, which it had written, of course. And I said, great, can you sort of clean it up? And I actually will use OpenAI and Claude sort of against each other.
I do the same.
Adversarially, correct this thing. And so it said, yeah, sure, I'll rewrite the whole thing. And I thought, this is never going to work again. And it actually, for one shot at it, and then I asked OpenAI, how did the code look now? I was like, oh, it's great. Like, okay.
Interesting. Yeah.
And Mike, when I know you're probably deeper into just using LLMs and AI. Where does this go for you, and like how does it like start to impact professional coders, and how do you see all that sort of going?
Oh, that's a great question. Look, I've got two kids that are they're grown now, but they're not technical, and so when Lovable came out as like the fastest growing revenue curve of all time, that's one of these vibe coding platforms.
Crazy.
Where you have to go ask to see the code, right? Otherwise, it's going to do something.
Right.
When that came out, I did the $20 subscription, and my son was shopping for a house. We built a website in about 20 minutes that wherever you are, it shows you the prices of the houses around you with a clickable link to the Google Street View for that house, right? And stood it up on a URL and turned it on, right? And I'm not going to share the URL because my Google key is in that. My
security,
but at least you know better.
Exactly. But so it was just fascinating to me that I did have to before it actually all worked. I had to paste in a little JSON that I might have spent some pixie dust on, some human cells trying to make it work. But it did in about 20 minutes. It stood up a working website that included integration to third-party APIs and was registered at the right domain service and whatever, right? It was all right there. So it looked good. I mean, all kinds of things had happened in that 20 minutes. So where do I see it is a good question. Look, I like Stu. I have multiple tools working all the time, right? I do use Cursor. But my work in Cursor, it's sort of like a backseat driver, right? As I'm typing, it's suggesting what's next. And a lot of times I'm rage spamming the escape key. Like, no, I don't want that suggestion. No. But I have noticed that if I turn it off, I miss it. Right. So I don't want to turn it off, but it's like a backseat driver. It's somebody giving me, hey, watch out for that intersection. Oh, did you know that? Right. And so it's really good in that regard. And I think there it makes everybody more productive. Right. So I can't see somebody being serious about a development job where they wouldn't have that kind of supervisor. Yeah. But then at the same time, I've also got in another window to the point where I have to have it alert me when it's done. I've got another window running background jobs, right? Where I want it to, rebuild a user interface, or I want it to, I've got one example of how to do something and I want 5, right? Like, this is a good example. I did a little personal finance simulator. Basically it's an object and you tick it and it just updates finances. And so you might have a subclass that's for a job because you get money in and you get taxes out. Oh, so you better have a taxes object, right? And then you have a checking object and a mortgage object, right? So you have all these little objects and you tick them and you can watch your finances change over time. Well, it was great because I literally just said, all right, here's an example of how I want it to work. It's got credits and debits. Everything goes from one account to another account. This is what this one's tracking. And then I said, my wife wants to retire in 3 years. My son's done in college in 1 year. The house will be paid off X. And it just ripped out this list of these things and built the forecast out, right?
Cool.
So it is pretty cool. Where it fails, though, and this I've seen it go off the rails miserably, which is another reason why professional developers are in no danger. Is when is the AI slop problem, right? AI slop is when it just starts creating bulky code that does nothing, and that's very real. Yeah. It's very real, and there's a huge cost of that.
Yeah.
And you are you are many things for sure, but one of those things is a senior professional grade developer, if you will, besides being CTO and a whole bunch of things. Yeah. And many people in the vibe coding arena are not that. And that recognition of the slop is sort of a different thing. That said, it sounds like you're well on your way to sort of monetizing your apps. You sort of get out of this career path, and you're off there selling personal finance apps and real estate shopping apps.
I will say just a couple more things. You're absolutely right. Look, there are insidious kind of problems in coding where you spend half an hour trying to get it to not do something, right? Yeah. And the model is really good at helping you find those. It's like you have to point the flashlight. You have to be in the right place, and sometimes I know in these 10 lines of the code there's a problem. I don't know what it is, so I'll just open a comment. I'll tell it start a comment, and it'll fill in. Oh, but this doesn't deal with the case where it's an edge case. It's midnight on a leap year, and this kind of thing. It's absolutely brilliant for those cases. I love it for any kind of bulky work. Like, all right, I just did a bunch of work. Comment that, right? Explain why it's doing what it's doing.
The way you're describing it to me, sort of, if we sort of, rather than describing this as pair programming and vibe coding, it's a spectrum, and sort of how you use it. And where you lie on that spectrum is very much sort of associated with where you are in terms of your capabilities and what you're trying to do. And the way you're using it feels a little bit more to me like some of the pair programming type model than maybe just the pure, hey, I'm wandering around my keyboard coming up with ideas and vibe coding it. But the way you're describing it to me sounds like it's sort of super beneficial, scalable, up into the enterprise level in a way that is the 3x, 5x, 10x to productivity.
Especially considering we're only at the beginning of models that were trained to code, right? Yeah. I mean, these things learned programming languages because they learned language. Like, imagine if we especially trained it, compared to the number of training examples it has for Chinese or English, the number of programming examples it has is tiny, right? So it's only going to get better, I guess, is where I'm going. Even with today's technology, these coding models could get much, much better than they are, and they will.
Yeah. I think I just wonder if it's, Go ahead, Steve. Go on.
I was just going to say, I think to Jim's point, because I think he's raising good questions about where is this valuable in the enterprise versus just doing a personal project or things like that.
Right.
One, there is a lot of value to professional developers. There's a lot of value, which might describe when you look at where does it make sense to vibe code in the enterprise as less of a full technical developer. I still think it can be pretty revolutionary, but it's not by shipping your product necessarily right away to 100 million people, that's with an enterprise. That's a really complex, big enterprise code base. But I think where it's really valuable in those cases, one of the challenges when you're building big enterprise apps is defining what you want, right? And normally there's a discipline called product managers for that, right? That are really they're writing hey, here's the way I want the UI, or UX designers, here's the way I want the UI to work. Here's the way I'd like to do this. Those folks who normally then hand off that to a developer to implement, they can now do rapid prototyping.
They can iterate like crazy on this, 100%.
So you can iterate super quickly on that, and close the gap in terms of accurately
That's a good point.
describing to the person who's going to implement it what you have in your head, because that's usually, it's very often difficult to communicate what you have in your head to someone else. So you can kind of quickly put together those type of prototypes. You can run pipelines where, look, every time a professional developer does check it in, there's a certain amount of agentic work that's done on top of that to make sure the level of commenting is right, to do a code review, to do certain things like that. Security audits, great example. So there's an enormous number of ways this is making enterprise.
I think it's a good point. I think the
faster.
product managers really end up being big winners here.